The events began with someone calling out the name Seoho, and Seoho immediately responded affirmatively. Then he was surprised when he was asked to take over the position of leader of the merchants group instead of the current leader. Seoho refused, explaining that the position rightfully belonged to his older brother, not him, especially since he was the youngest in the family. The brother pointed out that Seoho was more skilled than him in this field, and insisted that Seoho was the main reason the merchants group had transformed from a small band into one of the 3 largest trading groups. Seoho hesitated and began to feel the pressure of the responsibility. He then reacted emotionally, explaining that he didn't like bearing responsibilities and preferred a comfortable life without constraints. He reaffirmed his refusal by saying that the position of leader would force him to attend banquets, appease false partners, and shoulder the blame if the group's reputation was damaged. Silence fell after that, and tension was evident on everyone's faces, and the calm continued to dominate the gathering. After a moment of thought and a sigh, the older brother agreed, saying that Seoho should do what he thought was right. He told the young man again to do as you wish. Suddenly everything changed completely and everything burned. Flames spread, devouring everything he had built with his family over the years. Amidst the fire, Seoho saw his bodyguard, who had protected him all his life, lying dead on the ground. He also saw his second brother dead beside him. Then he saw the rest of the leaders around him, all dead, including the head of the finance wing, Mr. Jang, the head of the breeze wing, Mr. Lim, the generals, and other wing leaders. Seoho sat stunned, staring at the corpses of everyone he knew around him, blood flowing from his face after being injured. Seoho immediately recognized the attacker, the leader of the White Heaven Merchants Group, Namgung Kang. The assailant held his sword to Seoho's neck, lamenting that he had to kill him, and looked at him with a mocking smile. Seoho asked him sarcastically and provocatively if the White Heaven Group was not supposed to be under the control of the Orthodox Muram Alliance, so how could they do something like this? The leader, Namgung Kang, replied that his superiors had heard that Seoho was hindering their business, adding that what happened was because Seoho interfered in their affairs for money. Despite his injuries, Seoho sneered and replied sarcastically that those who lost to him in competition did all this just for money, pointing out their lack of skill and the ridiculousness of their excuses. The leader became enraged at Seoho's words, then asked contemptuously if Seoho had lost his hearing. Suddenly, Seoho made one final attack, channeling a glowing internal force from his hand and shouting fiercely. But his opponent was faster, and Seoho received a powerful blow that threw him harshly to the ground. The injured Seoho began coughing with difficulty due to his severe wounds, regretting that he hadn't been more cautious of his opponent. The leader of the other group, Namgung Kang, stood over him, explaining that their attack was because of the danger posed by Seoho and the Yunhei trading group, and announced his farewell as he raised his sword to finish him off. Seoho received the fatal blow, unable to resist. In the final moments of his life, he wondered in deep sorrow if everything he had done with his family was meaningless, and if the lives of merchants held any value in the vast world of Muram. He thought with regret that things might have been different if he had started learning martial arts earlier, and if the Yunhei group had expanded bigger and stronger. He wished that the circumstances had been different, so that all this death might not have happened. Suddenly he heard someone calling him young master, and he opened his eyes in surprise. He found himself in a strange situation, with someone scolding him that, despite his illness, he shouldn't fall asleep on his first day of work. Seoho woke up extremely confused, wondering what was happening, and if he was still alive. The man in front of him began to scold him angrily, demanding that he prepare an analysis of last year's harvest data. Seoho felt disoriented, his vision blurry, and he couldn't hear well. Then he heard another voice telling him that the leader of the trading group was very worried about him, and suggested that he rest in bed. Still in shock, Seoho mistook the man in front of him for his former enemy, Namgung Kang, and attacked him in anger, shouting his name. But the man was surprised and barely dodged the attack, then hit Seoho on the head, scolding him for sleeping during work and mocking him, saying he was still dreaming. Seoho felt that the blow was strangely familiar, and when he regained focus, he realized the man in front of him was not Namgung Kang, but Yu Suak, the head of internal affairs for the Yunhei trading group. Seoho was stunned, since Yu Suak had been dead for a long time, and he wondered in panic how he was alive now. Seoho shouted in astonishment, asking if he was in hell now, to which Yu Suak replied sharply and sarcastically that it seemed Seoho hadn't woken up properly yet. Yu Suak explained that in all his years teaching the 3 young masters, none of them had ever dared attack him, and told Seoho he was very special for having such courage. Seoho, embarrassed, apologized, and claimed it was just a mistake because he wasn't fully conscious. Yu Suak ordered him to return to his room and sit facing the wall as punishment. Seoho sat on the thinking chair in his room. trying to process the situation, and kept wondering why Yu Suak was scolding him instead of being dead as he remembered. He realized that he had somehow returned to the past, and remembered that the first task he was given when he began learning about commerce was to analyze last year's harvest supply. He recalled how Yu Suak had harshly scolded him that day and mocked the quality of his report. Suddenly, Seoho began to consider the possibility that what was happening now might be his chance to change his future. Regaining his composure, he called for his bodyguard, Young Am. And his bodyguard Young Am immediately appeared before him, responding respectfully and assuring him of his full readiness to obey orders. Seoho began by asking his bodyguard, Young Am, about his current age. Young Am was surprised by the question and sarcastically asked if the blow Seoho had taken had made him lose his senses. Then he replied that Seoho's 15th birthday had been just yesterday, which shocked Seoho greatly, causing him to repeat, 15 years old? In clear astonishment, while he remembered in disbelief that he was actually 39 years old. Seeing Seoho's condition, Young Am wondered if they needed a psychiatrist to examine Seoho, who seemed quite disturbed. Seoho looked at his hands and found them soft and without any scars, confirming that he really had returned to his youth. He then hid himself to check if he was dreaming, and felt a sharp pain. Young Am was baffled by his actions, and asked what he was doing, to which Seoho replied that he was in pain, prompting Young Am to angrily and sarcastically say, of course he'd be in pain if he hit himself. Seoho was still in shock, repeating that he was actually dead. He quickly recalled his painful memories, remembering his family lying dead before him, and the moment when the sword of the White Heaven Merchant's leader pierced his neck. He felt pain again as he touched his neck, realizing that what had happened was real. Seoho was stunned and amazed, fully realizing that he had returned to the past. But even after coming back, the memory of the massacre remained vivid in his mind, and he felt sharp pain again as he pressed his hand to his neck, recalling that moment intensely. He made a strong decision that he would never allow what happened to happen again, especially since he could still clearly remember all the events he had gone through before, and now he knew how to overcome and avoid them this time. He resolved to use all his past experience to become stronger and face the Murim Alliance with even greater power. Then he remembered something important, so he called his bodyguard Young Am again to confirm the date, and asked if he was sure that yesterday was his 15th birthday. Seoho quickly began calculating the years, and at that moment, he realized there was only 1 week left before the horrifying incident would occur. Seoho quickly called out to Young Am, telling him that they needed to act immediately and take preemptive measures, insisting that they had to do something without anyone else knowing. Young Am was bewildered by Seoho's words and strange behavior, and sarcastically commented that Seoho must be going through adolescence, but Seoho strongly denied it. Meanwhile, elsewhere, a mysterious figure dressed in dark clothes was preparing his weapons in the shadows. Those around him asked if he was sure about what he was planning to do, and the man replied mysteriously and confidently that he knew exactly what he was doing. Two men began a conversation about Seoho, the youngest member of the Yunhei trading group. One of them mentioned that Seoho had started learning about trade matters, and that his bodyguard, who always accompanied him, was highly skilled in martial arts. The other man asked if he could carry out the mission without getting caught. The man replied confidently that he wasn't afraid of a sick child who couldn't move without a cane, and that he had a plan to deal with the bodyguard, Young Am. He asserted that if anything went wrong or any problem arose, he would kill all the witnesses without hesitation. The other man mocked him slightly, reminding him that he himself used to serve that family in the past. But the mysterious man responded coldly that the fate of the youngest Seoho of the Yunhei group was early death, and added with a sly smile that if he could end his suffering and kill him early, he'd be grateful for it. He confidently stated that Seoho was probably waiting for death himself at this very moment. At that moment, Young Am called out to Seoho with concern, as the two of them were together in a cold, snowy place, and Seoho was riding on his servant's shoulders while holding binoculars. Seoho jokingly told his bodyguard that he was a weak person who needed some exercise and exploration, which was why they were out searching for something. Young Am was puzzled and asked what exactly they were looking for. Seoho thought about a strange fruit and said to himself that he was searching for the best miracle cure in the entire region. Suddenly, a bloodstain appeared on the ground, triggering a painful memory from Seoho's previous life, where his bodyguard had been severely wounded and was urging him to escape from that place. Seoho painfully replied that he couldn't leave without him, but Young Am told him that this was his mission and duty, and asked Seoho to flee while he held off the attackers, assuring him he would die content as long as his sacrifice was not meaningless. He sadly reminded Seoho that he had never listened to him since childhood, and asked him angrily if he was going to make his death a worthless sacrifice. At that moment, the enemies drew closer, shouting that they must be caught, while Young Am prepared to face them and called out to Seoho, telling him he had to survive because he believed Seoho could go far if he stayed alive. Seoho remembered then that there were only two people in his past life whom he could trust completely. The first was his personal bodyguard, Yu Young Am, and the second was his loyal servant, Baljap, who was shivering from the cold as he carried Seoho. Seoho decided that what he was searching for now was the miracle cure that would soon cause a bloodbath in the near future, and that these two were the only ones he could trust with the mission to find this dangerous cure. Seoho's servant asked what they were searching for in the snow, and Seoho pointed to a distant spot, telling them it was over there. He specifically pointed to a miraculous fruit called the pure ice peach, a fruit that holds an immense yin energy equal to that of the 10,000-year ice ginseng. His bodyguard was surprised by the mention of such a fruit and asked what it was. Seoho explained that it was a miracle medicine to treat his unique condition. Young Am expressed concern about using an unknown medicine, especially since they already had many miracle medicines at home. But Seoho clarified that the usual medicines weren't enough for him, because his condition was completely different from just a collapse of the energy channels. Seoho then revealed his true condition, known as the mysterious dragon star body, a rare physical state where a person is born with an exceptionally strong yin energy. For women, this energy enables them to reach the peak of martial arts skill, but for men, it clashes with the yang energy in their bodies, leading to an early death. The only way to avoid this fate is to take a miracle medicine rich in yin energy during adolescence to properly transform the body's energy. Seoho explained that in his previous life, he realized this fact too late, and it was impossible for him to obtain the pure ice peach at that time. His bodyguard asked him to explain in more detail, but Seoho refused and asked him to trust him just this once without more questions. Then he pleaded personally, which made Young Am agree despite his frustration at Seoho's constant stubbornness. Young Am quickly moved to retrieve the fruit, while Seoho stood in contemplation, wishing to become as strong as possible so that his bodyguard would never have to sacrifice his life for him again. A few days later, Seoho was seen unusually energetic and lively, greeting the palace staff with a bright, "Good morning." Though some responded coolly, it was clear that Seoho was more energetic than ever, and even his bodyguard appeared exhausted, suffering from a cold due to their recent trip. The palace staff began to notice major changes in Seoho, pointing out that he had grown taller and more energetic. An enthusiastic young woman remarked that even his face had changed, and that he was now the most handsome man she'd ever seen. Others commented on his new way of speaking, which sounded more mature than his real age, and the girl said he seemed kinder and wiser, which made everyone feel a bit strange and led the bodyguard to urge them to get back to work instead of gossiping. It later became clear that Seoho had consumed the miraculous fruit, which completely reshaped his body and greatly enhanced his energy and strength. When the transformation was complete, he opened his eyes and told his bodyguard and servant to keep this change a secret. It was obvious to both of them that a dramatic change had occurred, despite Seoho's insistence on hiding it. While Young Am, the bodyguard, and the servant were talking together, Young Am joked that as long as Seoho was healthy, that was enough. But he threatened in jest that he would kill him if he ever got sick again. In the finance wing, the official Yu Cheng-ui was left speechless upon seeing a huge amount of completed documents in front of him, so shocked he couldn't even speak. He kept repeating in amazement, wondering how Seoho managed to finish all that work in just 2 hours. Before him was a massive pile of papers and files that should have taken at least 2 days to complete. The official inspected one of the documents carefully, skeptical that Seoho had done everything correctly, and remarked that this work should take at least 2 days. Seoho replied calmly, though a little hesitantly, that he hadn't written out the entire documents from scratch. Instead, he had only written the summaries, then smiled and said it hadn't been that difficult. But inwardly, he regretted it right away, realizing he should have pretended more convincingly to be a beginner, given his extensive experience from his previous life, which allowed him to finish such tasks so easily. At that moment, the finance official addressed him respectfully as young master to give him some important advice. He told Seoho that his words might sound a bit harsh, but even the smallest task in the finance wing must be carried out with great care. He added that the flow of financial information in the group is like the flow of blood in the human body, and any leak of information could lead to disaster. Seoho picked up on the official's hint and wondered if the man suspected he'd finished the work so quickly because of carelessness or a lack of accuracy. Indeed, the official responded bluntly that Seoho had finished the work much too quickly, which raised his suspicions. The finance official remembered a previous incident where Seoho had fallen asleep on the job and even punched the head of internal affairs, which made him even more doubtful of Seoho's abilities. Seo-ho clearly noticed the official's expression and understood he doubted his competence, thinking to himself that the official's thoughts were obvious. At that point, Seo-ho confidently decided to propose a bet to prove the correctness of his work. The official asked in surprise what kind of bet he meant. Seo-ho told him he would take the documents right away to the head of internal affairs, Yu Suak, and proposed they bet on whether he would approve the work or reject it. The official laughed, telling the young man he was certain the head of internal affairs would be furious about the work. But he decided to accept the bet, saying that Seo-ho needed a lesson to make him less arrogant, and asked what the wager was. Seo-ho replied that the loser would have to complete the rest of the day's paperwork, and jokingly added that the loser would also have to dance the 0-2 dance at the ceremony announcing his older brother's new position. The official was shocked by this very strange suggestion and wondered to himself if Seo-ho was joking or actually serious. But the official accepted the bet, challenging Seo-ho not to back down, and Seo-ho agreed enthusiastically. At that point, another member of the finance wing named Ah-sung tried to calm them down, saying they were getting too excited. The finance official yelled at him angrily not to interfere in a man's fight, which deeply affected Ah-sung, who protested that he was their senior and the highest-ranking official there. After that, Seo-ho and the finance official decided to go immediately to Yu Suak, the head of internal affairs, to settle the bet. When the head of internal affairs saw the documents, he asked seriously if Seo-ho had really completed all these papers himself, saying that even most wing leaders couldn't handle such a task. Seo-ho smiled confidently and calmly, while shock was clear on the face of the finance official, who had doubted his work. The finance official protested strongly, pleading with the head of internal affairs to review the documents carefully again, insisting there must be some mistake. Yu Chang-yui, the finance official, started shouting in anger and disbelief when he saw the result of Seo-ho's work, exclaiming how could the young master, who had only just begun to learn the job, accomplish it all so skillfully. The head of internal affairs, Yu Suak, angrily responded by hitting him hard on the head, sarcastically asking if his glasses were just for decoration. Meanwhile, Seo-ho stood by quietly, thinking to himself that Yu Chang-yui was not lacking in skill, but the standards of the head of internal affairs, Yu Suak, were ridiculously high. Then Seo-ho approached Yu Chang-yui, placed his hand on his shoulder, and told him with a laugh that he was looking forward to seeing his promised 0-2 dance. Yu Chang-yui tried to call out to Seo-ho to stop him, but Seo-ho simply left the room, closing the door behind him. Afterwards, Seo-ho appeared feeling pleased and proud of himself. But he was quickly interrupted by a voice telling him he looked annoyingly happy. The voice continued in an irritated tone, criticizing Seo-ho for only causing trouble for their parents and older brother because of his health, yet still laughing carelessly. The owner of the voice became clear. It was his second brother, Yoon Jin-ho, who sharply called Seo-ho an extremely annoying person. Seo-ho was suddenly struck by the terrifying image of his brother dead in his previous life, which made him feel unsettled and sad. Seo-ho turned toward his brother, quietly calling his name, Jin-ho. Jin-ho was a bit surprised by his brother's calmness and gentle gaze and nervously asked why he was suddenly acting so nice. Was he looking to die? Seo-ho remembered that at this point, his relationship with his brother was extremely strained, so it was only natural for Jin-ho to react this way. Then Jin-ho explained seriously that he was against Seo-ho learning about the trade business, fearing his health would worsen and worry their father. Seo-ho understood his brother's concern and admitted to himself that Jin-ho was right. Jin-ho then warned him not to pretend to be sick in front of their father when they went to see him later. He added sharply that if Seo-ho fainted again like last time, he would kill him himself. Seo-ho replied with a gentle smile, assuring him he would be careful and not repeat what happened before. Jin-ho then coldly said that he didn't like him and stormed out angrily. He slammed the door behind him. This was Seo-ho's first meeting with his father and brother since returning to the past. As Seo-ho walked, his cane fell to the ground, causing him to pause for a moment in thought. Seo-ho smiled to himself then, deciding it was time to show them his true abilities. Suddenly, memories of his previous life came back, when the finance wing went up in flames. During that incident, the fire resulted in the death of a junior official who was on duty at the time. The fire also destroyed all the documents, causing a massive loss to the group. Seo-ho realized that the fire was not just an accident, but a deliberately planned arson by someone. Seo-ho then returned to the finance wing and saw the finance official, Yu Chang-yui, still engrossed in his work. Seo-ho decided that he had to act freely and decisively to prevent that disaster before it happened. Finance official Yu Chang-yui noticed the young man looking at him strangely and asked irritably why he was staring like that. Seo-ho just smiled and said it was nothing, and that he was going inside now. At that moment, Seoho decided that if he wanted to prevent the upcoming incident, he needed to change the way others saw him. That evening, the members of the Yunhei Trading Group family gathered at the family's main residence. Everyone sat around a large table full of food, and the atmosphere was quiet at the start of the meeting. The eldest brother, Yoon Young-ho, began by addressing his second brother, Yoon Jin-ho, and asked how things were going in the Sunset Wing, noting that it was completely different from the Breeze Wing. Jin-ho replied, clearly at ease, saying that work in the Sunset Wing was easier for him because he preferred physical, hands-on labor over using his mind. The youngest, Seoho, remained quiet, listening to them without speaking. The eldest then turned to Seoho, asking if he had started his practical training in the finance wing. Seoho replied politely and respectfully that he had. His older brother gently advised him not to rush his learning and to take things slowly, expressing concern that Seoho might push himself too hard. Seoho reassured him kindly, saying that he knew his own limits and worked within them, remembering that his older brother had always been kind and considerate, even in the past. But Seoho was suddenly struck by a painful memory of his older brother and decided he never wanted to see his brother in that tragic state again in this life. He felt sadness and bitterness from those memories, telling himself he refused to see that image ever again. Jin-ho suddenly interrupted sharply, dismissing his younger brother's words as nonsense. He spoke to Seoho with heavy sarcasm, questioning how he could talk about working within his limits when all he did was lie in bed and take medicine. The eldest Young-ho objected strongly, rebuking Jin-ho for speaking so harshly to their younger brother. Jin-ho, still agitated, insisted that Seoho's arrogance and lack of self-awareness came from the constant protection their eldest brother gave him. Then he angrily wondered how long they all would keep exhausting themselves, caring for someone who was nothing but a burden on the family. The eldest grew angry and told Jin-ho he had gone too far. But Jin-ho defended his position forcefully, saying everyone knew Seoho's situation. He was so weak he coughed up blood and needed a cane to walk, then sarcastically asked what job Seoho could possibly do for the Yunhei group. Despite his mental maturity, Seoho felt a deep pain from his brother's harsh words. But he decided to face the situation himself, suddenly turning toward Jin-ho and calling his name firmly. Jin-ho snapped, angrily telling Seoho not to address him like that. Seoho quickly calmed the situation, saying quietly that they should end the discussion. He pointed out that their father was about to arrive, and that their father wouldn't be happy to see this scene. The eldest quietly agreed, saying everyone should calm down. Meanwhile, the eldest brother wondered to himself about the youngest's strange behavior. Noticing that something was oddly different about him today, he seemed more mature. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of their father's arrival, announced by the servant. Seoho immediately looked cautiously toward the door when he heard this. Then, with clear tension and a low voice, he addressed his father. The father entered the room quietly, apologizing for being late due to a long meeting. The eldest son smiled and replied that they had just arrived and it was no problem. But the father immediately noticed his youngest son's flushed face and asked worriedly if he was sick or if something was wrong. Seoho began answering his father's question about why his face was red with nervousness and embarrassment, quickly denying that he was sick. But deep down, he knew the real reason for his flushed face was the painful memory of seeing his father dying in his previous life. He vividly recalled his father's face in those final moments of his past life. At that moment, his father, Yoon Gil-sung, noticed that his son wanted to say something, so he asked him if there was anything he wanted to tell them. Seoho hesitated for a moment, trying to control his emotions, reminding himself that the person in front of him now was his father in his youth, not the painful image he had seen before. Seoho realized he was losing control of his feelings a bit, so he urged himself inwardly to calm down and think rationally. He reminded himself that what had happened in his past life had not yet occurred in this one, and that he should focus only on his current goal. He then took a deep breath, trying to calm himself and control his emotions. After that, he admitted with a simple smile that his father had understood his feelings, and clearly said that he did, in fact, have something important he wanted to say. His father and older brother were surprised by this sudden confession, and the father looked at him in astonishment, waiting for clarification. Then he asked him to sit quietly to discuss the matter, and Seoho immediately agreed. Seoho reminded his father of an old conversation that took place before he began his training in the finance wing. At the time, the father said that because of his son's weak body, he was not allowed to take on full responsibilities at work, but only to get a general overview of the business. But Seoho seriously questioned whether this situation was right, saying that the day would come when he would be asked to lead the members of the wing himself. His brother Jin-ho heard his words with surprise, wondering about the reason for this sudden change in his brother's attitude. The father agreed that what his son said was true and asked him directly what exactly he wanted to say. Seoho replied firmly that he wanted to take on all the tasks, including night shifts, just like his older brothers and the other members of the wing. But the father refused his request directly and firmly, telling him clearly that he would not allow it. Seoho stood shocked at this sudden rejection, unable to react. But he quickly pulled himself together and asked his father if this refusal wasn't a bit too harsh. The father responded even more firmly, explaining that some things simply couldn't happen, especially the night shifts, which required staying up and managing security all night, and that this was impossible given his health condition. The father stressed strictly that Seoho could perform any other tasks, but the night shift was completely forbidden to him. Seoho internally rejected this decision strongly, because he knew he had to be present in the finance wing on the night of the incident to prevent the fire that he knew would happen in the future. So Seoho decided to challenge this decision, telling his father that if he could prove his physical ability to handle the night shift, would his father allow it? His father was slightly surprised, then smiled sarcastically and asked how he could possibly prove such a thing. Seoho replied confidently that he would have a sparring match with his brother Jin-ho. Everyone was shocked by his words, especially his older brother, who appeared utterly astonished. As for the father, he was visibly taken aback by this strange and unexpected suggestion. Meanwhile, Jin-ho erupted in anger, looking at him with fierce intensity, and shouted at him, asking if he had completely lost his mind. A confident smile appeared on Seoho's face as he asked his brother Jin-ho if he was afraid of possibly losing the match. The eldest brother Jung-ho intervened, astonished by Seoho's suggestion, and sharply asked him what he meant by that. Seoho calmly replied, explaining that since everyone was worried about his health, easing their worries was also a kind of filial duty. Seoho added, emphasizing that he knew Jin-ho had recently become a first-class fighter, and explained that if he could endure facing him, it would prove his ability to handle all the responsibilities in the finance wing. Jin-ho was affected by Seoho's words and admitted to himself that his brother's reasoning was sound, then asked their father to allow them to fight. The eldest brother tried to intervene to object, but Jin-ho quickly interrupted him and directly asked their father for permission, and the father quietly agreed. The eldest brother was surprised by his father's decision, but the father insisted on his stance, saying that Seoho must learn to take responsibility for his words and actions. The father wisely added that everyone will face trials at some point, and that now was the right time to test Seoho. Seoho noticed that his father was completely convinced he had no chance of winning against Jin-ho, but he considered this natural and expected. The father clarified the conditions of the match, saying that the gap between Seoho and Jin-ho was very wide, and if Seoho could endure for just 1.5 rounds, he would grant him permission to take on all responsibilities, including night shifts, and asked him if he could do that. Seoho bowed respectfully and thanked his father for giving him this opportunity. The eldest brother Jung-ho looked extremely worried and kept sighing out of stress over the danger of the situation. Jung-ho advised his younger brother that if the fight became dangerous, he should surrender immediately, and there was no shame in doing so. But Seoho calmly and confidently told him that he didn't think he would need to surrender. At the same time, Jin-ho's expression was changing sharply, growing very angry at Seoho's words. The match began in the wide, open training ground, with Seoho and Jin-ho standing face to face. The guards and soldiers present were surprised to see Seoho on the fighting platform, as one of them remarked that not long ago he could barely stand. But Seoho gestured to them with a calm smile, asking them to be quiet and stay calm. The servant tried to reassure young Am, the bodyguard, affirming that Seoho would be fine, and wished that he truly would be. Meanwhile, the eldest brother, Jung-ho, stood next to their father and asked if he was worried about Seoho. But the father answered calmly that he saw no reason to worry. Jung-ho expressed his concern that Jin-ho had always looked down on Seoho, which might make him go hard on him in the fight, and the father responded quietly, contemplating his words. The events began with a decisive confrontation between the two brothers, where the younger Seoho stood confidently and calmly in the fighting arena, deciding to just observe at first. On the other side, his brother Jin-ho appeared serious, angry, and ready for the match. Some of the guards and soldiers present were extremely surprised by the sudden fight between the brothers, thinking that the whole family might have lost their minds because of this strange duel. The bodyguard felt great unease at Seoho's calm and provocative behavior, wondering if he had been taken over by some mysterious force. Then their father, Yoon Gil-sung, gave a clear order to start the match by beating the drums, which made the guard in charge hesitate for a moment and ask him again to confirm the order. The bodyguard hesitated a bit, worried about the danger, but soon decided to carry out the order enthusiastically, secretly hoping for the younger brother to win. Jin-ho prepared for the fight in anger, directing harsh words at his brother Seoho, accusing him of not knowing his real place. He said that Seoho was born a spoiled child, receiving lots of love and attention, which made him believe that everything was at his command. At the same time, Seoho prepared calmly and confidently to respond to his brother's attack. With a sharp gaze, Jinho thought that Seoho had been pampered and spoiled since childhood, making him think the world was beneath him. Jinho internally declared that he would teach him a harsh lesson as the older brother and launched a strong attack at him. Suddenly, Jinho recalled a moment from his childhood when everyone around him joked that he couldn't take his eyes off his younger brother because he admired him so much. Then another memory appeared, when he touched his baby brother's hand for the first time, and their father told him that his brother was so small and that he must always take care of him. Jinho looked at his brother as a baby then, listening to his father's advice. But now Jinho strongly rejected this role in his mind, wondering why he should always have to take care of his younger brother. He angrily added that their father had always expected him and the eldest brother to act like good older brothers, while Seoho always behaved inappropriately as a son. Jinho decided he couldn't take it anymore, launching his attack even harder, telling himself that he wouldn't do it anymore. On the other hand, Seoho remained extremely calm, seriously considering what level of strength he needed to use to counter his brother's attack. At that moment, Seoho used an advanced dueling technique called Snow Dragon Steps, moving with unusual speed and lightness that amazed everyone. Jinho was completely shocked. He couldn't follow his younger brother's movements and began to feel confused. Their father, eldest brother, and the guards were all stunned by Seoho's unexpected skill. Meanwhile, Seoho suddenly seemed to stumble during his movement, which caused surprise and concern. Seoho fell in an exaggerated, comical way, playfully claiming that he was just trying out a technique he'd just read about, but tripped and fell by mistake, adding that he was really lucky to have dodged the attack. Jinho became furious at his brother's provocative behavior, wondering to himself if he was actually joking. With even more speed and power, Jinho launched another attack at Seoho, who kept dodging the attacks with astonishing ease and calm. Meanwhile, clear astonishment and confusion showed in the eyes of the father and eldest brother, who still couldn't comprehend what was happening. The eldest brother asked his father in amazement at Seoho's sudden skill, "How can this kid do all this?" The father remembered his advice to his son Jinho not to underestimate the words of his younger brother Seoho, explaining to him that Seoho would not have suggested such a duel unless he had thought it through carefully. Then the father confirmed to himself that his youngest son, Seoho, was the greatest talent in the history of the Yunhei trading group. Despite his confidence in Seoho's talent, the father was still surprised by the level Seoho displayed in the fight, especially since Jinho was not yet fighting with his full strength. The father was amazed at Seoho's ability to endure for so long against his brother, who was considered a first-class fighter, especially since Seoho had previously suffered from balance problems. The father wondered to himself how strong Seoho could become if he learned under the guidance of a real master. But at that moment, the father felt concern not for Seoho, but for his son Jinho, who was extremely agitated. Jinho was deeply frustrated, wondering anxiously why he couldn't land a single hit on his younger brother. Suddenly, Jinho remembered that everyone had always talked about Seoho as the greatest genius in the history of the group, which only increased his anger and confusion. Then Jinho recalled a moment from the past, when he saw his younger brother Seoho become seriously ill and cough up blood, which made him afraid for him. His concern was clear as he watched his brother from afar, unable to intervene. At that time, his father told him that he would no longer be able to train him himself, and that he would entrust his training to the head of external affairs. Jinho tried to object, explaining that he wanted to be personally trained by his father. But the father firmly told him that he had to give up, since his brother was too sick and needed care, and that he was now the responsible older brother. Meanwhile, Seoho was in a very critical condition and suffering greatly. When Jinho anxiously asked what had happened, those present told him they needed to stop the internal bleeding immediately and asked what had caused it. At that point, Jinho began crying and shaking intensely from guilt, as it became clear that he had accidentally fed his younger brother an elixir containing yang energy, causing his condition to worsen. Jinho cried bitterly, apologizing to his father and insisting that he only wanted his brother to recover quickly. But the father, in his anger, pushed Jinho away from him forcefully without saying a word. Jinho sat in shock at his father's reaction, who blatantly ignored him. Then Jinho overheard the doctors discussing Seoho's condition, saying that even if he recovered, the internal injuries would be very severe. All these painful memories brought back to Jinho his feelings of anger and guilt at the same time during the current fight with Seoho, as he blamed him inwardly, saying that all the problems started because of his weakness since birth. With all this anger, Jinho wondered anxiously why he had to endure all this suffering because of his brother. At that moment, their weapons clashed powerfully, and Seoho looked at him calmly, saying that family is a very complicated matter. Seoho continued calmly, explaining that because of the strength of the sibling bond, having grudges between them becomes inevitable, even when living together their whole lives. Jinho was astonished at what his brother said, and asked him indignantly what he meant by that. Seoho quietly explained that it was just a piece of wisdom he had heard before, but Jinho wasn't interested in knowing more, and attacked fiercely once again. At that moment, the eldest brother wondered anxiously how much time was left until the duel was over, and the bodyguard answered nervously that there were only 9 seconds left. Jinho showed his intense anger, releasing a powerful energy from his sword as he prepared to attack. Jinho spoke to Seoho with fury and agitation, accusing him of continuing his meaningless talk and insisting that things would not be so easy anymore. The eldest brother was shocked by what he saw and shouted, trying to stop Jinho, demanding that he stop immediately and set his emotions aside. But Jinho didn't listen and launched his attack with full force and violence. At that moment, Seoho spoke to himself in complete calm, noting that Jinho had no idea of the real truth. Then Seoho remembered his brother's words from his previous life, where he told him that family relationships are extremely complicated and that hatred can linger in the heart, even among family members. Jinho continued in his memories, thinking that when a person lives with feelings of hatred for a long time, he forgets the real reason for them, explaining that his hatred for Seoho was just like that. He clarified that he felt deep helplessness, anger, and guilt at the same time because he couldn't do anything, and because the family always favored Seoho over him. In a painful moment of memory, Jinho apologized to his younger brother Seoho, saying he was truly sorry that his feelings had bothered him all his life, even though it was never Seoho's fault. With one final painful scene from the past, Jinho inwardly asked his brother Seoho never to forgive him for what had happened. Seoho returned to reality just as Jinho was charging in for the attack, and Jinho suddenly wondered to himself, how could all of this be Seoho's fault alone? In the midst of his fierce charge, he repeated the question inside himself. How could he blame him for all of this alone? In a sudden moment, Seoho dropped his weapon and deliberately allowed himself to take the attack directly, declaring that they had all been immature in the past. This action shocked and astonished everyone who witnessed the scene, including the father and the eldest brother. Jinho was utterly stunned when he saw Seoho deliberately abandon his weapon. But Seoho calmly smiled and told Jinho that his current attack was the same one he had used at the start, even if he had added powerful sword energy to it. Seoho continued inwardly that he simply couldn't forgive Jinho for what had happened. But he decided this was enough for the confrontation. Jinho remained shocked and frozen, unable to attack again, as he contemplated what Seoho had done. Meanwhile, the guards and the eldest brother were so stunned that the bodyguard didn't even notice the hourglass in her hand out of sheer shock. But she soon announced that the time was up with no clear winner in the 10-minute match, so she asked who had won the bet. Seoho stepped forward confidently and declared himself that the winner of the duel was the youngest master, referring to himself. The scene then shifted to the finance wing, where the officials were discussing the news of Seoho's victory, which remained a secret from the public. While reviewing the papers prepared by Seoho, one of the officials was greatly impressed by his ability to organize and coordinate the data so perfectly. Then, with a sly look, this official suggested that Seoho should be nominated as his personal assistant and made to work 24 hours a day. The scene ended with Jinho training alone, trying to vent his frustration and anger through strength in the training ground. Swinging his sword with force, Jinho tried to vent the anger and frustration that consumed him after his confrontation with his younger brother Yoon Seoho. While training, Jinho remembered painful moments from the past when his younger brother suffered from a serious illness and lay bedridden, which brought back his old feelings of helplessness and guilt. Jinho also recalled another scene from the past when everyone was anxiously gathered around his sick brother while he watched helplessly from afar. Meanwhile, Seoho was talking to himself calmly, saying that family relationships are always very complicated. Jinho threw his sword to the ground, panting from exhaustion, anger, and intense frustration, then admitted to himself honestly that he was very angry. Yet, despite his anger, he felt a strange sense of relief after facing his younger brother. After that, Jinho went to one of the maids and asked what his younger brother Seoho was doing at the moment. The maid replied nervously that Seoho had been taken by the head of internal affairs. Jinho was surprised and puzzled about the reason behind this, while Seoho appeared in a closed room, looking surprised at the strange situation he had been put in. Then the head of internal affairs, Yu Suak, entered, smiling slyly and telling him there was a rumor that Seoho could finally start taking on real responsibilities. Seoho replied, a bit nervously, admitting that this was technically true, but wondered if something was wrong. In the next moment, Yu Suak's assistant, Jo Young-yong, entered, carrying someone else who was screaming and resisting violently. Then Yu Suak announced with a wicked smile that Seo-ho was officially his assistant from today, and that this was approved by the head of the Yunhei trading group, so there was no use resisting. At that moment, Seo-ho remembered from his past life that the reason for Yu Suak's death was overwork and severe exhaustion. Yu Suak began explaining to Seo-ho the tasks he would be taking on, which included managing the group's finances, reviewing documents and loans, and preparing budgets and weekly reports, all of which would be an enormous burden. Seo-ho was extremely shocked by the amount of work awaiting him. Yu Suak's assistant, Jo Young-yong, tried to reassure Seo-ho, kindly telling him not to worry too much. She told him he would soon start enjoying the work, just like she did. But Seo-ho confidently refused, insisting that this would never happen. Seo-ho explained to himself privately that if he accepted the job as Yu Suak's assistant, he would not be able to leave the office before midnight, and he wouldn't be able to carry out his main mission of preventing the fire he knew would happen in the finance wing. He also remembered how, in his past life, he saw Yu Suak's previous assistant fleeing in terror from exhaustion, and there was no guarantee he wouldn't suffer the same fate if he accepted the job. Seo-ho felt extremely afraid that he would end up the same way, so he decided he had to do anything to avoid that outcome. Seo-ho addressed Yu Suak, trying to persuade him to decline the position. Seo-ho began explaining his point of view, saying that he believed the real goal of training was not in the actual work, but in a comprehensive understanding of management operations, and that he had only started his training 2 days ago. Seo-ho then suggested to the head of internal affairs that it would be better to choose someone else more competent for the position, stressing that he only wanted to learn the routine tasks and did not want any special treatment. Yu Suak paused to think for a moment, especially after Seo-ho mentioned that the assistant to the head of internal affairs usually doesn't take night shifts, and that night work is the core of administrative work, where all the difficulties and realities of staff work are concentrated. Yu Suak then said that he understood perfectly what Seo-ho meant and thanked him for explaining. But then he smiled slyly again, announcing that Seo-ho would take on all the routine tasks, in addition to the night shifts as well, which shocked Seo-ho once again. Feeling terrified and shocked after head of internal affairs, Yu Suak announced his new duties. Seo-ho, in a moment of sheer panic, decided to run away from the place immediately, causing the guards to shout at once for him to be stopped. Members of the Silver Wind armed squad belonging to the Yunhei trading group quickly grabbed Seo-ho tightly, preventing him from escaping. 3 days later, an announcement was posted listing the names of those assigned to the night shift that day, Yu Chang-yui and Yun Seo-ho. When Seo-ho saw this announcement, he remembered that this very night was the night of the great fire in the finance wing. At that same moment, Yu Chang-yui appeared, calmly reading a document with focus. Seo-ho noticed Yu Chang-yui's presence, and immediately recalled that the previous incident that led to Yu Chang-yui's death happened during his night shift, and felt relieved that he remembered this detail clearly. But at that particular moment, he was feeling extreme exhaustion from the pressure of work, to the point where he felt he was about to go insane from how much he wanted to sleep. Seo-ho explained to himself that he had been forced to take warmth pills used by the merchants of the Yunhei group to stay awake, which made him feel like he was exceeding his limits every day. Although the internal energy he had previously obtained from the pure ice peach helped him quickly overcome fatigue and exhaustion, the workload being sent to him seemed to be constantly increasing, and he wondered if he was just imagining this, or if head of internal affairs Yu Suak was deliberately trying to drown him in work. Meanwhile, Seo-ho reminded himself that he needed to get out of this place quickly after tonight, before he turned into a workaholic like Yu Suak's assistant, Jo Young-yong, who seemed happy to keep asking for more work. Seo-ho spoke to Yu Chang-yui, telling him that he was relying on him for this night shift, and Chang-yui calmly replied that he was relying on Seo-ho as well. Seo-ho thought to himself that he first had to get through this night safely. Late at night, while Seo-ho was working with focus, he noticed Yu Chang-yui entering and suggesting that they drink tea together before starting the shift. Seo-ho refused the tea, saying he was fine and preferred to stay without any drinks. The two of them then sat together in silence for a while as they worked. Seo-ho suddenly broke the silence by addressing Yu Chang-yui, asking if he had anything he wanted to say to him. Yu Chang-yui replied that he didn't know what Seo-ho meant, and Seo-ho assured him that there was nothing special. After that, Yu Chang-yui decided to go on an inspection round alone, though Seo-ho was surprised by his insistence on doing it by himself. After Chang-yui left, Seo-ho called for his bodyguard Young-am, but received no answer and assumed she might be asleep. Suddenly, Young-am appeared, sitting in a high place inside the room, which made Seoho wonder at her choice of strange places to hide. He gently asked if she would like to come down and have some tea with him, and Young-am was surprised by the offer, but gladly accepted. After Young-am drank the tea, she noticed it was a bit bitter, and blamed Seoho for letting it boil too long. But soon the effects of the sedative appeared, and she fell asleep on the ground, while Seoho stood watching her, and calmly said he was sure the tea contained a sleeping agent. Seoho felt extremely tired as he saw his bodyguard Young-am deep in sleep, and wished he could sleep like her too. But despite his exhaustion, Seoho decided to start his inspection round of the area. At that moment, a mysterious figure appeared sneaking around the finance wing, and Seoho had already decided that he would catch the arsonist tonight. As this person moved, something fell from his hand to the ground, making a faint sound. When he struck a match to start the fire, Seoho surprised him from behind, mocking him and saying he seemed very enthusiastic. The mysterious man was startled and confused by Seoho's sudden appearance. But Seoho, with a quick and swift move, snatched the lit match from his hand before giving him a chance to react. Seoho examined the match, impressed by how well it burned, and commented, "Like oil on a burning fire." Seoho mocked the man for being so well prepared to start the fire, asking if he had made all his preparations for this act. Then called the man by his real name, revealing his identity as Ah-seung, a member of the wing, which greatly surprised him. Ah-seung became furious and angrily demanded to know how Seoho had discovered his identity. Seoho smiled sarcastically and asked if he would believe him if he said he knew it from the future. Ah-seung replied seriously, ignoring the sarcasm, saying it was clear Seoho wouldn't tell him the truth, and Seoho sarcastically asked if that was really the important thing now. Seoho explained very coolly that what mattered was that he had caught him red-handed trying to set the place on fire. Ah-seung suddenly burst into hysterical laughter, admitting to Seoho that he was right, and that the rumors about his intelligence didn't seem exaggerated after all. But then, suddenly, he pulled out a knife and asked with a wicked smile if Seoho was here alone. Seoho replied jokingly and teasingly, calling out to him that he was still single, which made Ah-seung even angrier, and he launched an attack, screaming at Seoho to die. Meanwhile, Yu Chang-yue appeared elsewhere, inspecting the area with a lantern in his hand, feeling somewhat suspicious. He remembered a previous conversation he had with Seoho, when Seoho had asked if he had something he wanted to say, but Chang-yue had denied it at the time. The scene then returned to Chang-yue, who now directly asked Seoho how he managed to get his work done so quickly. Chang-yue explained in great confusion that he had spent more than 3 years working in the finance wing and had never managed to finish the work like Seoho did on just his second day. He then asked what kind of magic Seoho had used. Seoho joked, asking if that was the reason for his cold behavior towards him, but Chang-yue became annoyed and insisted that he wasn't being cold. Seoho calmly replied that he didn't see himself as special in any way, and that it simply had to do with trying to do more than just finish tasks. He also tried to understand the intentions of the head of internal affairs behind them. In the middle of the conversation between Yoon Seoho and Yu Chang-yue, Seoho laughed lightly, commenting that he was starting to sound like an old man, explaining that these were words he learned from his father. Chang-yue expressed both his frustration and his respect at the same time, due to Seoho's remarkable abilities. Seoho replied calmly, explaining that these feelings shouldn't be negative, but can be used as motivation for growth and development. Chang-yue smiled, saying that was also something he had learned from his father, then decided to go on his inspection round. Seoho wondered if Chang-yue was going to do it alone, and Chang-yue replied that it would be for the best. As Chang-yue walked around the place, he wondered to himself how a beginner like Seoho could surprise everyone like this, and he also wondered if the future of the Yunhei trading group was really in Seoho's hands. With this feeling, he recalled how annoying Seoho could be at times. Chang-yue decided to have a warm cup of tea to calm himself, but regretted not drinking the tea Seoho had offered him earlier. As he drank his tea, he was surprised, noticing oily stains on one of the utensils, which caught his attention and concern. Elsewhere, the confrontation between Seoho and Ah-seung had become intense, with Ah-seung attacking fiercely. But Seoho managed to fend off the attack easily, saying with a confident smile that, after fighting Jinho earlier, this fight was much easier for him. He then executed a highly advanced martial technique from the Snow Dragon art called the Bamboo Strike, making the fight seem effortless for him. Ah-seung was completely shocked by Seoho's high level of skill, wondering to himself how someone known for illness and physical weakness could possess such strength and agility, while suffering a series of blows. Ah-seung still couldn't comprehend what was happening, wondering in disbelief if this was a dream. The scene then shifted to Ah-seung's past, where he lived a miserable, aimless life, trembling with anxiety as he played mahjong and felt his life was worthless. In a moment of despair, he decided that instead of living a meaningless life, he would bet everything on a single mahjong tile. But he lost again, which made him furious and caused him to get into a fight with the other players, accusing them of cheating and rigging the game. Ah-sung then found himself lying on the ground after being beaten, reflecting on his seemingly worthless and aimless life. Suddenly, a mysterious person appeared, mocking him and calling him Warrior Ah, saying he was in a miserable state. Ah-sung pleaded that he could return the money, reminding the man that he was a member of the finance wing of the Yunhei trading group and could earn money again. The mysterious man agreed with him, acknowledging Ah-sung's competence, and proposed a new offer for him to work together again. As Ah-sung lost consciousness, he felt that everything was meaningless and was overwhelmed by a sense of resignation and complete despair. But before he completely passed out, he was struck hard by Seo-ho, who shouted at him that he wasn't allowed to faint just yet. Yoon Seo-ho was interrogating Ah-sung, who looked extremely exhausted and was coughing badly. Seo-ho told him in a frightening tone that he was no longer human. Seo-ho then explained to Ah-sung that when being beaten, he should only speak the truth, and asked if he understood this. But Ah-sung didn't answer immediately, which made Seo-ho demand a clear answer from him again. After some time had passed, specifically around 4 or 5 in the morning, Seo-ho stood in the outer courtyard addressing the other leaders and members, apologizing for causing such a disturbance at this early hour and asking them to understand that he had his reasons. Seo-ho explained to those present that the message had already reached them. The person who had tried to set fire to the finance wing had been caught. Meanwhile, Ah-sung appeared tied to a tree, hanging in the air and swinging, a terrifying warning scene. Seo-ho confirmed that investigations revealed the operation was orchestrated by the Lotus House of Courtesans. He added that the water wheel belonging to the head of the breeze wing, Jok Byung-chul, was very helpful in forcing Ah-sung to fully confess the truth. Ah-sung was in complete collapse, begging them to just kill him. Seo-ho's father appeared, asking seriously and calmly whether the Lotus House of Courtesans was truly responsible for this incident. Seo-ho commented that he was certain Ah-sung felt deeply betrayed by that. He then explained that the Lotus House of Courtesans was one of the 5 largest courtesan houses in the Hubei region and had long-term business dealings with the Yunhei group. The head of the breeze wing, Jok Byung-chul, added that the Lotus House owed a large debt to the group and might have tried to get rid of the evidence of that debt by starting the fire. Meanwhile, the head of the Sunset Wing, Yoon Dami, said that if the plan had succeeded, it would have been very difficult to discover the perpetrator, especially with so many entities owing debts to the group. For his part, the head of external affairs and leader of the Silver Wind Squad, Go Il-byung, expressed his relief that things ended peacefully. Seo-ho stood quietly reflecting on what had happened, while the others praised him, pointing out that if he hadn't discovered the fire, everyone would have been in great danger while they slept. Inwardly, Seo-ho was certain that guard Yu Chang-wei would have burned to death if he himself hadn't stopped him from drinking the drug tea that would have put him into a deep sleep. Seo-ho decided to cut off the praise being given to him, emphasizing the need to discuss the next step. Go Il-byung noted that Seo-ho showed no arrogance despite being so young, and that he moved directly to important matters without hesitation. Yoon Dami was amazed by Seo-ho's composure despite the seriousness of the incident, confirming that he was very talented. Suddenly, head of internal affairs, Yu Suak, asked Seo-ho to take Ah-sung down from the tree because he felt uncomfortable seeing him hanging like that, pointing out that he was still a human being after all. Seo-ho was surprised by this request, as he hadn't expected such words from Yu Suak, but he agreed in the end. After Ah-sung was taken down, one of those present kindly asked if he was okay, and Ah-sung thanked the head of internal affairs for his kindness. But Yu Suak surprised everyone by hitting Ah-sung hard, saying that if he was awake, that meant he was ready to take more beatings. Yu Suak continued, extremely angry, explaining that he had to work all night because of him, and continued to beat him harshly. Yoon Seo-ho proposed to the leaders and members of the Yunhei trading group that they actually set the finance wing on fire. Head of Internal Affairs, Yu Suak was utterly shocked by this suggestion and tried to shout his objection, but Head of External Affairs, Go Il-byung, stepped in to calm him down, saying that this was his workplace, and they should listen to what Seo-ho had to say. Head of the Sunset Wing, Yoon Dami, commented that this plan was truly impressive. Seo-ho then continued, explaining that they needed to cover up the truth with a lie, quoting a saying that lies confuse the truth, and what is false confuses what is real. He then clarified his idea further, emphasizing the necessity of making the Lotus House of Courtesans believe that their plan to burn the wing had actually succeeded, so they would reveal their true intentions. The other leaders agreed with Seo-ho's plan, except for the head of Internal Affairs, who continued to reject the idea completely, considering it madness to burn down a perfectly good building because of a lie. But since the majority agreed with the plan, it was decided to actually burn the finance wing. In a dramatic scene, the wing went up in flames while Seoho walked away calmly and confidently amid the shocked screams of Yu Suak. All the documents and the bodyguard Young Am were in a safe place, away from the fire. Seoho stood watching the building burn, just as it had in his previous life, but this time he felt he was in much better control of the situation. Seoho assured himself that this fire would be a step toward the group's success, not its downfall. Yet at the same time, he felt a bit of pity for Yu Suak, who collapsed in despair, wondering about the cost of rebuilding. Afterward, Seoho asked one of his workers about the deadline for the debt owed by the Lotus House of Courtesans, and the man replied that the deadline was next month, specifically on Buddha's birthday. Seoho smiled and said they would leave the problem hanging until then, and would raise the necessary funds from other sources. A month later, in one of the largest courtesan houses in the Hubei region, some people were talking about the great fire that had happened at the Yunhei Trading Group. They wondered in amazement about the cause of the fire, and one of them mentioned hearing that all the contracts and important documents related to the Lotus House of Courtesans had been completely burned. Another assumed that the group used the fire as an excuse to avoid paying the debts. At that moment, the chief manager of the Lotus House, Seo So-chang, appeared, extremely annoyed at the idea that burning the documents wouldn't exempt them from paying their debts. He then decided to step in to stop what was happening and entered to meet the master of the house. But he was greatly surprised to find the housemaster surrounded by courtesans. Seo So-chang was furious at the scene and angrily asked the housemaster if he had gone back to behaving this way again, even though the previous master had forbidden it. But the housemaster cut him off sharply, demanding that he get to the point quickly. Then the housemaster, Baek Bok, said with a clear threat that he was making him want to kill him. Inwardly, Seo So-chang decided he should resign from his job, describing the housemaster as a useless person. But he collected himself and told him bluntly that he had heard he was planning not to pay the debts owed to the Yunhei Group, even though burning the documents didn't exempt them from their obligations to their longtime partners. The master of the Lotus House of Courtesans, Baek Bok, appeared indifferent as he said nonchalantly that a long time had already passed since the debt was due, and that if the Yunhei Group had been aware of the matter, they would have caused a problem already. Then he ordered his manager to leave the room. But the chief manager, Seo So-chang, hesitated and objected, saying that they hadn't said anything yet, so Baek Bok angrily repeated his order for him to leave immediately. Seo So-chang protested emotionally, saying that the previous master of the house would never have acted this way. Baek Bok called his manager over and told him to come closer, so the manager complied, feeling anxious. As the manager approached, Baek Bok began searching for something beside him. Suddenly, Baek Bok smashed a bottle over the manager's head while cursing him in extreme anger. Seo So-chang fell to the ground in pain, gasping for breath, and then Baek Bok violently demanded, "Who is the master of this house right now, him or his father?" He continued angrily, complaining that all the manager ever did was get in his way. Baek Bok then sat back down in his chair and sarcastically told the manager that after finishing the current issue, he would deal with the merchants of Dune. He then turned to a courtesan who was trembling with fear and told her with a smile that the demands of the Dune Group were a bit annoying, but that they served the White Heaven Group, which was one of the 3 largest trading groups and directly affiliated with the Murim Alliance. Baek Bok continued with an evil smile, explaining that as soon as he finished dealing with this issue, everyone would stop comparing him to his father, and he wouldn't have to work with the Yunhei Group ever again. He then added with a laugh that he might even get rid of the Yunhei Group entirely. At that moment, a servant suddenly entered, apologizing for coming in without permission, but saying the matter was urgent. The servant then said in great fear that the Yunhei Trading Group had arrived at the house with their guards. Baek Bok was shocked, wondering how they had arrived so suddenly. Yoon Seoho appeared standing at the door with his group members, surprised that no one had stopped them even though they came without warning. One of the group members commented sarcastically that he didn't expect the house to pay good wages to their guards, considering they didn't pay their partners' debts. Seoho then decided to enter directly, since it didn't seem they were ready to receive guests. Seoho stormed into the house, weapon in hand, confidently announcing with a smile that they had come to collect their money. Seoho entered with enthusiasm, humming cheerfully, which made his group members wonder at his strange happiness. Seoho then burst into the room where Baek Bok was, shouting sarcastically that he had come to collect his money. Some group members were surprised, wondering why Seoho seemed so interested in collecting the money himself. Baek Bok angrily asked who this person was who barged in like this. At that moment, Seoho noticed the courtesan lying painfully on the ground, and his expression changed immediately. Seoho then called for his bodyguard Young Am, who responded instantly with respect and attention. Seoho began moving toward Baek-bok, saying sarcastically that he had thought he was just someone trying to dodge his debts, but it seemed the truth was much worse. Seoho continued his sarcastic conversation with Baek-bok, pointing out that he hadn't realized just how useless and pitiful Baek-bok truly was. He added with biting sarcasm that if the former master of the Lotus House saw what Baek-bok was doing now, he would be very proud of him, which greatly enraged Baek-bok. Baek-bok moved towards Seoho in clear anger, striding quickly in his direction. He then tried to attack directly with his sword, but Seoho blocked the attack with complete confidence and calm. Meanwhile, a member of the Yunhei trading group was whispering cautiously to his colleague, telling him something. Seoho then returned to mock Baek-bok, saying that if he had already drawn his sword, he might as well attack right away, instead of chattering. Or did he want Seoho to ask him to do it himself? These words infuriated Baek-bok even more, and he shouted, calling Seoho a brat as he launched another fierce attack. But Seoho blocked the attack easily and with astonishing speed, surprising everyone. Seoho stood there, quietly smiling and confident in his strength, despite Baek-bok's rage. Baek-bok continued his violent attempts to attack Seoho, but Seoho managed to counter all of his attacks without much difficulty. The signs of anger and confusion on Baek-bok's face grew as he was unable to even touch Seoho. Baek-bok finally stopped, panting and exhausted, wondering inwardly how Seoho could fend off all his attacks so easily. Suddenly he remembered what he'd heard before, that the second son of the Yunhei trading group, Jin-ho, was the martial arts expert. So he began to question who Seoho really was and just how strong he might be. Seoho smiled as he noticed his opponent's confusion and mockingly told him that if things weren't going his way, then he deserved to be properly punished. Baek-bok tried to launch another surprise attack, shouting angrily that Seoho wouldn't get away so easily. But Seoho surprised him from behind and told him in an icy calm voice to clench his teeth tightly, which completely unnerved Baek-bok. Then Seoho struck him hard on the head with his cane, causing Baek-bok to fall to the ground in intense pain. Seoho mocked the sound Baek-bok's head made when struck, wondering aloud if his head was empty inside because of the loud noise it produced. One of the group members anxiously wondered if Baek-bok had died from the force of the blow, but Seoho calmly reassured him that he hadn't hit hard enough to kill him. One of the Yunhei group members approached Baek-bok and ordered him to wake up, slapping him across the face. Baek-bok woke up in terror, seeing the face of the Breezewing's head, Jok Byung-chul, grinning at him menacingly and asking if he was awake now. Baek-bok was so frightened that he recoiled, screaming in horror. Jok Byung-chul mocked Baek-bok's fear, taunting that he looked terrified just by seeing his face, and asked in a threatening, sarcastic tone if he wanted to die. At that moment, Baek-bok looked up and saw Seoho standing before him, ready to finish what he had started. Seoho spoke firmly as he looked at Baek-bok, who was sitting on the ground, saying that this was neither the first nor the second time they'd been late on payments, and that the Yunhei group had only been patient with them out of respect for the previous master of the house. He then asked if they really thought the group was just a bunch of fools. Baek-bok tried desperately to deny everything, stammering in confusion, and asking what payments they were even talking about. At that moment, Seoho threw a pile of documents in Baek-bok's face, telling him that they were records of all the goods that the Yunhei trading group had provided to the Lotus House of Courtesans. Seoho then confirmed that they had not paid a single coin for these goods during the entire past year. Finally, Seoho clearly declared that the contract signed between them stated that if payment was not made, full ownership of the Lotus House of Courtesans would be transferred to the Yunhei trading group. Baek-bok reacted to these words with intense anger, shouting at Yoon Seoho and accusing him of presenting forged and falsified documents. Baek-bok continued confidently, explaining that he knew about the fire that had destroyed all the finance wing's documents and accused Seoho of trying to blackmail him without any evidence. At that moment, the head of the Breeze Wing, Jok Byung-chul, intervened with a clearly annoyed expression, declaring that he could no longer stand to hear these accusations. Seoho threw his cane forcefully beside Baek-bok's head, challenging him to take another good look at the documents he claimed were fake. Seoho grabbed the document and held it up in front of Baek-bok's face, demanding that he open his eyes wide and clearly see the old paper and the worn-out seal. Doubt and tension began to overtake Baek-bok, who realized deep down that the document was indeed genuine, causing him to sweat and feel afraid. Wondering if the Dune group had made a mistake in carrying out the plan, Baek-bok began trembling and growing confused, questioning to himself whether the Dune group had lied to him and why they would do such a thing. Seoho slowly waved the document in front of him, saying mockingly that this was the sound of his tiny brain trying to think. which made Bekbok even angrier and more unsettled. Seoho then asked sarcastically why Bekbok hadn't just managed the Lotus House properly and lived a comfortable life, instead of resorting to such shady methods. Then he told him plainly that it was clear he'd been conducting suspicious dealings behind everyone's backs. At that moment, the chief manager of the Lotus House, Seo So-chang, intervened and asked for permission to speak. Seoho noticed his identity and remembered that he was the manager who had previously been mistreated by Bekbok. Seoho recalled that Seo So-chang was the person who had once managed to turn a failing courtesan house into one of the top 3 houses in Hubei, thanks to his exceptional management skills, and felt sorry that he was now working under such terrible conditions. Seoho stepped forward and introduced himself formally to Seo So-chang. Seo So-chang ignored the pleasantries and went straight to the point, producing the account book for the Lotus House of Courtesans and asking Seoho to turn to page 7, explaining that there was a recently opened new branch that had not been officially registered. At that moment, Bekbok leapt up, screaming in anger and threatening Seo So-chang that he would kill him if he said one more word. Bekbok suddenly stopped when he felt the presence of Seoho's bodyguard behind him, who stood glaring menacingly and holding her knife. But he quickly went back to clearly and violently threatening Seo So-chang. A member of the group intervened and asked Seoho for permission to speak with Bekbok personally. He then told Bekbok plainly that everything was over and that he needed to stop immediately. He explained to him sadly that he had completely crossed the line. Elsewhere, Seo So-chang recalled some rumors that had once circulated about Bekbok and how he had always been compared to his late father, with his abilities clearly inferior by comparison. Seo So-chang remembered a scene from the past, when he saw Bekbok broken and alone, suffering from the constant pressure and comparisons. Bekbok was seething with anger, talking to himself with intense hatred and resentment, wondering if people really thought his father would remain in his position forever, hinting at his hidden ambitions to take control. Seo So-chang recalled the reasons that had made Bekbok such a troubled person. Then So-chang explained to Bekbok that, despite knowing he could never fill his father's shoes, he had always tried to support him, expressing his regret for all the efforts he made to maintain a good relationship with him. For his part, Bekbok shouted at So-chang with anger and resentment, while the latter calmly asked Yoon Seoho to check the financial records that had been mentioned earlier. At that moment, Seoho began to consider the possibility that the Dune Trading Group was involved in what was happening. Seoho remembered that the Dune Group was affiliated with the White Heaven Merchants Group, which was directly connected to the Muram Alliance. Seoho wondered to himself what the Muram Alliance might be planning this time, and while he was lost in thought, So-chang interrupted him by calling, "Young master," to bring him back to attention. His bodyguard Young Am noticed his long distraction and asked him with concern what was weighing so heavily on his mind. She asked him why he wanted to visit a particular wing, requesting that he explain clearly so she could help him if anything happened. Seoho smiled gently and told her that he wasn't entirely sure why he was going, apologizing and saying he had to find out for himself. At this point, So-chang felt a bit annoyed, wondering if he ought to hit Seoho at least once for his indifference, then told him that the wing in question was the new wing being built by Bekbok. Upon their arrival, Seoho noticed that the wing looked more ordinary than he had expected, but the surrounding air was strangely cold. Seoho asked his bodyguard, Young Am, if she sensed anyone nearby, and she replied that she didn't sense anyone. Seoho decided to enter the place for now, thinking that no one was around. Upon entering, So-chang pointed out that the place was empty because there was an order forbidding anyone from entering until the next day. At that moment, Seoho began to feel something strange in the place and told So-chang that he had previously sensed something suspicious there. Seoho asked So-chang to stay directly behind him and got ready with his bodyguard for any possible danger. Very quietly, Seoho called out to the person hiding in the darkness, telling them to reveal themselves and come out immediately. A mysterious figure dressed entirely in black, with his face covered, emerged from his hiding place. Seoho was surprised by the person's ability to hide without anyone noticing his presence, and demanded that he reveal his identity. The mysterious person did not answer, but instead drew his weapon and immediately began to prepare for an attack. Seoho realized there was no choice but to fight, and told his bodyguard Young Am to protect the manager, Seo So-chang. Then the fight began, as the mysterious person attacked with incredible speed. Seoho barely managed to dodge the attack, astonished at his opponent's extraordinary speed. A fierce confrontation began between Seoho and the mysterious person, as they exchanged blows with great speed and skill. After a rapid exchange of strikes, the mysterious person suddenly started to retreat. As he retreated, he made a quick move toward the door, attempting to escape. But before leaving, he threw a firebomb at them. Yoon Seoho shouted loudly, ordering everyone to get down immediately. and a violent explosion filled the place with smoke and dust. After things calmed down a little, Seo-ho checked on Chief Manager Seo So-chang, who replied, assuring him that he was fine despite the shocking situation. Seo-ho then realized that the bomb that had been thrown was not an incendiary bomb, as he had initially thought, but merely a smoke bomb intended to cover the escape. At that moment, he noticed that the only goal of the masked woman's attack was simply to escape from the scene, and he confirmed to himself that they could have been in great danger if she had decided to use her full strength. Suddenly, he heard a voice calling him from the corner of the room saying, "Over here," and it turned out to be Manager So-chang, who pointed to a secret underground entrance and said he had no idea why Baek-bok had dug such a secret tunnel, but it led directly to the main building of the Lotus House of Courtesans. Seo-ho was greatly astonished to find such a secret underground tunnel. After a brief moment of thought, Seo-ho asked his bodyguard Young Am to guard the entrance to the secret tunnel. Seo-ho then began to carefully inspect the entrance, realizing that the masked person was most likely directly connected to this tunnel. Seo-ho was shocked when he found the emblem of the Dune Trading Group, clearly engraved on the door leading to the tunnel. Later, Seo-ho returned to the main building of the Yunhei Trading Group, Unwol Wing, to speak with his father, Yoon Gil-sung. The father asked about the existence of the secret tunnel connecting the building to the Lotus House of Courtesans, as well as the Dune Trading Group emblem found there. Head of External Affairs, Go Il-byung, simply suggested selling the Lotus House if it was causing so much trouble. But Seo-ho immediately and firmly rejected this idea. Everyone was surprised by his quick reaction, so Go Il-byung asked in astonishment why he was so against it. Seo-ho calmly explained that the Lotus House of Courtesans was one of the 5 largest courtesan houses in Hubei province and was regularly visited by nobles and wealthy people, which provided them with excellent opportunities for networking and building relationships. He also confirmed that they could obtain highly valuable information through these relationships, in addition to promoting the goods of the Yunhei Trading Group through it. Seo-ho then continued confidently, explaining that if they kept the current chief manager, Seo So-chang, they would not need much effort in management, and it would be very profitable in the long run. The father, Yoon Gil-sung, agreed with him, saying he believed that manager So-chang was truly exceptional, based on what he had seen in the financial records. Meanwhile, head of internal affairs, Yu Suak, was smiling suspiciously, thinking to himself that he was so impressed by So-chang's abilities that he wanted to put him under his management right away. Seo So-chang suddenly felt a strange and inexplicable chill. Seo-ho turned to him with a cold smile, making him feel frightened and uneasy. After that, the father told his son Seo-ho that he would grant him a vacation as a reward for his excellent handling of the recent incident. The father explained that he understood how tired his son was after the finance wing incident, so he gave him a few days to rest comfortably. But head of internal affairs, Yu Suak, started to feel very angry at the idea of giving Seo-ho a vacation, and clear signs of anger and resentment appeared on his face. He kept repeating to himself, "Refuse, refuse it," in intense rage, completely rejecting the idea of giving Seo-ho any time off. In the end, Seo-ho told his father that he would personally handle Yu Suak, then asked his father to leave without worry. Yu Suak felt great terror at Seo-ho's frightening look as he grabbed him, trying to escape. Moments later, the bodyguard Young Am commented that, for a moment, it felt like there was a ghost in the Unwol wing, which made Seo-ho laugh and shiver a little at the joke. As Seo-ho left the place with his bodyguard Young Am, he wondered sarcastically to himself why everyone kept talking about ghosts. Then Seo-ho recalled memories from his previous life, realizing that the reason the nobles of Hubei supported the Muram Alliance and the White Heaven Group was because of the secret meetings held in the underground tunnel of the Lotus House of Courtesans. Seo-ho smiled confidently, knowing that this place now belonged to his trading group, and thus he had managed to deceive the Muram Alliance. Young Am looked at him with concern, thinking that perhaps he had lost his mind after seeing a ghost, especially with the strange smile he wore on his face. As for Seo-ho, he felt a tinge of regret, wishing he had been able to capture the masked man to learn more information. After that, Seo-ho asked his bodyguard Young Am to keep what happened in the wing a secret from his father, explaining that he didn't want to cause him any extra worry. Then he began to think seriously about the masked man, whose martial skills matched those of Baek-bok, and realized that if he faced the Muram Alliance in the future, he might encounter even stronger opponents. Seo-ho suddenly decided that he needed to go see his teacher from his previous life, and maybe today was the right time for that. At the same time, he remembered his teacher from his past life, feeling guilt and sorrow as he recalled him saying that if he had only hurried the patrol that day, he might have been able to save his son, who died just 2 hours before he arrived. In that moment, Seo-ho felt deep sadness, remembering what had happened before. Suddenly, Seoho asked his bodyguard what today's date was, which left her surprised and puzzled. Seoho was shocked and furious when he realized that today was the very day when his teacher's eldest son would die in a tragic incident. Immediately, he rushed through the forest with young Am and a doctor, trying not to be late to save him. Seoho asked young Am to look after the doctor and follow him later, insisting that he would go to the scene of the incident first. Young Am agreed calmly. Seoho began to recall that at this very moment, the eldest son was playing with his younger brother in the bamboo forest, and no one expected what would happen next. Seoho moved swiftly through the forest, feeling intense fear and worry for the fate of the eldest son. He began searching for the two brothers in the bamboo forest, afraid of the horrible fate awaiting one of them. At the same time, the eldest son was badly wounded, lying on the ground, while his younger brother tried to stop the bleeding in a state of panic. The younger brother begged desperately, calling for help from anyone nearby. At that moment, Seoho arrived at the scene, hearing the cries for help. The younger brother was sobbing bitterly, begging his brother to forgive him, saying that everything had happened because he suggested they play in the forest. But at that moment, Seoho approached him and gently placed his hand on his head, telling him very softly that it wasn't his fault. He added with a warm smile that his call for help was what allowed him to arrive and save them. The younger brother wept with relief, and Seoho told him kindly that he had done well. Then young Am arrived quickly, carrying the doctor to begin treating the eldest son. Seoho stayed to comfort the younger brother, while the doctor started working on the injured older brother. Seoho continued to reassure the younger brother, promising him that everything would be all right. With clear relief, Yoon Seoho stood watching the doctor treat his teacher's eldest son, commenting inwardly that he felt true happiness and comfort after succeeding in saving his life. The scene then shifted to the medical wing of the Yunhei Trading Group. Seoho stood closely observing the condition of his teacher's eldest son, contemplating the severity of the wound caused by the bamboo, and noting that had he arrived a little later, the injury would have been fatal. Seoho felt some comfort as he wished internally that in this life he might get to see his teacher smile more often, especially after saving his son. Seoho reflected on the pain parents feel when they lose their children, admitting he couldn't even begin to imagine such grief. Then Seoho resolved that he would change the future step by step, assuring himself that now was the right time for his teacher to arrive. At that moment, the teacher rushed in, calling out his son's name, Hyungjin, in deep concern. Seoho immediately noticed that his teacher had just returned from a protection mission. Seoho formally introduced himself to the teacher, explaining that he was from the Yunhei Trading Group and had found his son by chance in the bamboo forest and rescued him. The teacher thanked Seoho sincerely and with deep gratitude, explaining that the situation would have become a real disaster if not for his intervention. But Seoho replied humbly that he was merely lucky to be there at the right time. He then added honestly that it was actually the younger son who had saved his brother's life by stopping the bleeding until he arrived. The teacher approached his eldest son gently, who was sleeping peacefully, and placed his hand on his forehead to check on him. The teacher was deeply moved by Seoho's humility and respect, telling him that he truly didn't know how he could ever repay such a great favor. Seoho was flustered by his teacher's modest reaction, commenting inwardly that he never expected his teacher, whom he'd known in the past, to have such a sensitive and humble personality. Suddenly, the teacher noticed something strange about Seoho's hand, which caught his full attention. After a moment, the teacher asked Seoho if they could talk privately somewhere else. Seoho felt a bit tense and wondered if something serious was happening. The teacher was silent for a moment, then requested that they speak in a more private place, insisting that this was not the right time or place. He then told Seoho very seriously that it was about the unique nature of his body, which deeply shocked and stunned Seoho. Later that night, Seoho met his teacher alone in the forest, where the teacher apologized for meeting him at such a late hour and without any guards. Seoho smiled calmly, saying that it was fine, and guessed that his teacher didn't want anyone else to hear what he was about to say. The teacher smiled confidently, telling Seoho that he truly was clever. Seoho then wondered inwardly if the internal energy he had obtained from the pure ice peach was what had changed his body, and whether his teacher had noticed the change. In the end, the teacher asked him directly and clearly if he knew anything about the mysterious dragon star body. Seoho stood in stunned silence, realizing that his teacher already knew the truth about his special body. When the teacher confirmed to Yoon Seoho that it seemed he knew something about the mysterious dragon star body, he smiled gently and told Seoho not to worry or feel nervous. The teacher explained to Seoho that when he held his hand earlier, he could clearly sense a very strong yin energy within him. He clarified that he could recognize it so easily because he himself had studied the ice arts, which rely on that energy. The teacher then confirmed that from that moment, he he sensed Seoho possessed the mysterious dragon star body. Seoho cautiously asked if the teacher knew anything about this unique condition. The teacher calmly replied that he had met someone in the past who also possessed this mysterious body. Seoho was greatly surprised by this and asked in astonishment if the teacher had really met someone with the same condition before. The teacher confirmed that he indeed had, but apologized sincerely, saying he could not reveal that person's identity. Seoho accepted this quietly, explaining that he completely understood the teacher had his own reasons. The teacher then explained the real reason he brought up the subject. He seriously offered to teach Seoho the ice arts that he had mastered. Seoho pretended to be surprised, commenting inwardly that he had expected this, but decided to act as if he was genuinely taken aback. The teacher continued, saying that the circumstances of their meeting, Seoho saving his son, and his knowledge of the mysterious dragon star body all pointed to their encounter being destined. The teacher told Seoho honestly that he wanted to repay his kindness, and sincerely asked him to allow him to teach him. Seoho felt happy and relieved that everything was going so perfectly, to the point he could barely hide his smile. He then politely asked his teacher to instruct him in the ice arts he excelled at. The teacher was a bit surprised at how quickly Seoho accepted his offer, and expressed this openly. Seoho explained that it was impossible for him to refuse the chance to learn from such an important figure and leader of the Prosperous Protection Agency, a group with a long history with his own trading group. The teacher was convinced and said they would begin training the next morning. The following morning, the teacher started explaining the special technique Seoho would be learning, the sacred yin ice art. He told Seoho that he already had internal energy in his core, and that all he needed to do was remember the flow of energy the teacher would show him, and later practice it on his own. The teacher began channeling energy through Seoho's body so that he could feel and understand it well. At that moment, the teacher noticed something strange that greatly surprised him. He found that all of Seoho's energy channels were already fully open. The teacher asked Seoho seriously if he already knew anything about this martial technique. Seoho quickly denied it, explaining that he had no reason to know, but he recalled inwardly that he had already opened his energy channels earlier. The teacher then cautiously asked if Seoho's life had ever been endangered because of the powerful yin energy within him. Seoho answered honestly that he had taken a miracle medicine in the past that nearly killed him due to its potent effects. The teacher understood and said calmly that this explained a lot, adding that this technique was originally developed long ago to help people survive extremely harsh conditions, especially when on the brink of freezing to death. The teacher explained to Yoon Seoho that the martial technique he was about to learn had been invented long ago, at a time when their ancestors had to face the deadly threat of extreme cold. Perhaps something similar had happened to him in the past, which made Seoho feel somewhat guilty for not being able to tell him the whole truth. Then Seoho felt a gentle hand on his shoulder, and when he turned, he saw his teacher saying kindly, "Young master." Seoho responded with a smile and affirmation, and the teacher replied with clear joy that this was a good thing. The teacher looked extremely pleased and told Seoho that since he was now ready to use the martial technique, they could move directly to physical training and endurance exercises, starting from this very moment. Seoho was surprised and asked in great astonishment if they were really going to begin right now. The teacher confirmed with complete seriousness that the training would be so harsh he would want to curse him, which made Seoho a bit frightened. Then the teacher gently explained that since Seoho had saved his son's life, he would do everything in his power to ensure that his teachings would help Seoho preserve his own life as well. Seoho began to endure an extremely harsh routine, combining exhausting office work with the grueling physical training imposed by his teacher. He worked tirelessly during the day on documents, while in his spare time, he trained under his teacher's strict instructions. Seoho became so exhausted that he decided he would do nothing but lie down and relax during his next vacation. The scene then shifted to the finance wing, where one of the workers burst into the room, telling his chief that a guest was waiting for him. The head of the wing became very angry because he was so busy, and he asked furiously which guest he was talking about. But when the worker told him the guest was Mr. Song, the chief's reaction changed instantly, and he announced he would go personally to receive him. The chief of the wing then turned to Seoho and told him to get ready to accompany him. Seoho was puzzled and asked why he should go with him, so the chief explained that if Mr. Song had come, it usually meant there would be more documents to handle, and therefore it was better for Seoho to come along rather than having to explain everything to him later, which would just be a waste of time. Seoho felt frustrated by the chief's words and thought to himself that his boss left him all the work because of his own laziness, and he decided that he really needed to escape from this place. After that, the chief of the wing left the room and asked the wing assistant, Jo Young-yong, to take good care of Seoho. and with a sly smile, he told her he would give her more work when he returned, which left her shocked and oddly excited. Elsewhere, the head of the wing was sitting with Mr. Song, who welcomed him, saying it had been a long time since they'd last seen each other. Mr. Song then began to speak, indeed, and suddenly stopped, hesitating. The chief was surprised at his hesitation and asked what he wanted to say, but Mr. Song ignored the situation and indicated that the person accompanying him was just his assistant. He was about to call him my servant, but quickly corrected himself. After that, Mr. Song honestly explained that he had come today to ask for help. The chief asked seriously if there was a problem. Mr. Song replied, explaining that a few days ago, the officials had told him that some of his land had not been accounted for when calculating taxes. As Mr. Song continued speaking, he said that he had discussed the matter with someone he trusted, who told him that the officials apparently were searching for something. The head of the wing responded calmly, explaining that it seemed like just a misunderstanding, and thought that if they found what they were looking for, he could meet with the official and clear things up. Mr. Song went on mysteriously, revealing that what they were looking for was a doll that moved and danced on its own at certain times. Yoon Seoho was utterly shocked when he heard this, repeating to himself in disbelief, "A doll that dances on its own?" The scene shifted as another member of the Yoonhae trading group echoed in surprise, "A doll that dances on its own?" The head of the wing stepped in, saying he understood Mr. Song's position well, but then asked cautiously if it was really official Bo Jungsa, who had specifically requested this item. Mr. Song hesitated for a moment and seemed tense, then admitted awkwardly that the truth was a bit different, and that it was actually related to Lady Jo. An awkward silence fell over everyone after hearing Lady Jo's name, and tension was clear on their faces. After that, the head of the wing apologized to Mr. Song, explaining that unfortunately, they would not be able to accept this request. At that moment, Seoho recalled what he had heard about Lady Jo, picturing himself tied up and gagged as a sign of how dangerous the matter was. Seoho then explained that a strange game had spread among noblewomen, where they would select a lady each month and assign her to fetch rare items as a kind of challenge. Sometimes they would be asked to obtain things like a golden flower. If one of the ladies failed the challenge, she would be forced to host a lavish banquet for all the participants in the game. As for the winner, she would be treated like an empress by the other women until the start of the next round. The person who invented and managed this game was Lady Jo, the wife of official Bo Jungsa. Over time, the game evolved from a simple pastime into a fierce competition that began to harm ordinary people. Seoho admitted to himself that back then, he couldn't understand why they were so obsessed with such trivial games. But now he began to understand a little after witnessing the deeply troubled state of Mr. Song, who insisted that he had been greatly wronged. Mr. Song swore passionately that he had never done anything shameful in his life and couldn't understand how he could be accused of evading taxes on his land. He added that if he could just obtain that rare doll, he would be able to go directly to official Bo Jungsa and clear up the misunderstanding entirely. Seoho wondered to himself whether Lady Jo had destroyed the lives of many people in this way. He then recalled that Mr. Song was one of the Yoonhae trading group's oldest acquaintances and was held in high regard by the common people. At this moment, Seoho thought that if they helped Mr. Song now, he would certainly repay the favor many times over in the future. But he reconsidered when he realized the danger of getting involved with Lady Jo at this stage. The scene ended with Mr. Song in a state of deep silence and frustration, while the head of the wing tried to comfort him by placing a hand on his shoulder. With a sarcastic smile, Yoon Seoho wondered to himself what he was thinking about right now. He then sadly recalled the tragic fate that had befallen his trading group in the past, questioning what had led to such a painful end and what goal he was now determined to achieve after returning to the past. He vividly remembered a painful scene of his father, tied up and defeated, and promised himself that he would never forget that harsh image. The head of the wing untied Seoho, surprising the others who had assumed he was just a servant. At that moment, Seoho told them there was something important they needed to know, concerning a rare item that was in high demand. Seoho smiled confidently and said that he would personally go to obtain this rare item. Seoho explained that the real name of the rare item mentioned by Mr. Song was the self-dancing doll. As he thought about this doll, he remembered from his previous life that the person who created it came from the Golden Immortal Village in Jiangxi Province. Seoho decided that if he went there and asked about this person, he might be able to find him, but he reminded himself that he must absolutely avoid any confrontation with Lady Jo. He also remembered that the emperor would soon issue an order completely banning the noblewomen's game, and realized that once this order was given, all the problems caused by Lady Jo would come to an end forever. Seoho reassured himself that he would be fine as long as he stayed out of her sight until then. At that moment, his bodyguard Young Am called out to him, and Seoho responded in surprise, asking what she wanted so suddenly. In a stern tone, Young Am told him that he must inform her beforehand when and where he intended to go, especially since he had suddenly decided to go to Jiangxi province without telling her. Seoho tried to justify his decision by saying the roads were covered in dangerous snow, so there was no need for everyone to worry so much. Seoho added that he was now capable of carrying out business trips on his own, emphasizing that this mission was very important for the Yunhei trading group. He also assured her that his father and everyone else had already approved this journey. He then smiled and said that his older brothers had given him gifts and wished him luck on this trip. Young Am finally relented and told him he could go, but asked him to put aside his sword because of its danger. She then noticed that Seoho was smiling so much and asked him about the reason for his big grin. At that moment, Baljap jumped in enthusiastically, explaining that he felt both happy and nervous at the same time, since this was Seoho's first official business trip. One of the warriors joining the trip, Lim Gyeongbin, smiled and told Young Am there was no need to worry about Seoho. Seoho himself confirmed that he would do everything he could to ensure the journey went smoothly. Then, one of the warriors joked that their boss, Yu Suak, had asked them to bring Seoho back as quickly as possible. Young Am smiled sarcastically, commenting that their boss's advice was actually good, though she showed a bit of inner resentment. Then the warrior Lim Gyeongbin explained that the head of the Prosperous Protection Agency, Owak, and the leader of the Silver Wind Squad, Young Chung, would also be joining them on this trip, so there was no need to worry even if something happened. The warrior added jokingly, unless we run into bandits or something like that. At that moment, Seoho suddenly grew anxious and wondered if he was getting them involved in something dangerous with these words. Then Seoho quickly jumped out of the carriage to ask if something was wrong. Yoon Seoho noticed something and asked quietly in surprise what was happening. Then a strong-looking man appeared before them, staring at them sharply. The stranger gave a wide smile and calmly said that he hadn't seen them in a long time. After that, Young Chung, the leader of the Silver Wind Squad from the Yunhai group, greeted the head of the Prosperous Protection Agency, Kwak Myong-hyun, and asked him with a calm smile how he was doing. The strong-looking man turned toward the carriage and said that, judging by their direction, it seemed they were heading to Jiangxi province. Young Chung confirmed this, and said that they were carrying goods that needed to stay dry, but because of the heavy snow, their movement had slowed and everyone was quite exhausted. Upon hearing this, the large man said with satisfaction that this was good news for them. He then explained that the commander of their fortress had sent him to invite them to stop at their stronghold for a bit, to rest and have some warm tea. Young Chung and Kwak Myong-hyun exchanged approving glances at the suggestion. Meanwhile, Seoho stood a little apart from them, anxiously thinking to himself when he realized that they were from the Green Forest bandit gang. He quickly understood that the presence of these people in the area meant that a certain someone was definitely nearby.